All right, well, yes, hello, and thank you for coming, and thank you for having me here to speak with you. Again, my name is Elana Matchey. I'm head of analytics strategy at Netskope, and Netskope is a company that is all about providing cloud security to companies. And so I'm gonna, as when I was thinking about what to talk to you about today, I thought what might be interesting for you to hear from me is kind of my career story and how I got to where I am today. A little bit about analytics and some topics in analytics, since that made up a big part of what I do today and what I have been doing for well over a decade. I was thinking some career advice for all of you that has helped me, some things that have worked for me in my career and I felt like have helped me progress. And then we'll wrap up. But what I wanted to say to this group, first of all, is that I've never spoken to college students or in recent history, so I'm not really sure what's relevant to you. And it would be super helpful to me if folks interjected with questions and comments, because you know, I've had close to a 20-year career. I can spend a lot of time talking about it, but I don't want to bore you. So if there are questions that you have about some of my experiences or just thoughts, I'd love to hear from you. So does that make sense to everybody? Yeah. All right, awesome. So I'll start out talking about my story. I'll start out just basically who am I as a person, just like on a personal level. Oh, this is kind of slow, huh? On a personal level, right? This is my family. This is some recent pictures we took on vacation to Cape Cod in August. And I'll just say for kind of history, I grew up in Southern Rhode Island. Also, I'm an immigrant to this country. My parents were political refugees that fled here from the Soviet Union in 1990, and I came with them when I was 8 years old. So, you know, I spent most of my life in America, but I do have the immigrant experience. I have 3 beautiful children, and I have a wonderful partner in life, and I have a big supportive family, and all of these things I feel really blessed for, because having a support system and a wonderful family also is a critical component to having a successful career. And not all of us get that, but if you have it, it's a blessing. So that's just a little bit for background for who I am. So for me, the change over to Netskope was amazing. I kind of describe it like this, like life for me at Bank of America was sort of like this, Dorothy living in Kansas in the black and white land. But when I landed at Netskope, really, I saw new colors because of the experience I had. Truly, the amount of exposure that I got, the ability to learn new things in a much smaller company, but one that is at the cutting edge of technology, was incredible. I learned in a year what I learned at Bank of America in maybe 5 or 7 years. My network tripled the size, and I got exposed to all the vital organs of a company that makes up a company. The sales department, the customer success department, the product management, engineering, marketing, you name it. And it was incredible. It was incredible. It is incredible. So that's what I'll say. And I think kind of, if you think about that, what are the life lessons of that? I think it's important to understand, if you're not happy and if you don't know what else makes you happy, you have to keep searching, and hopefully you'll find it. I did, but it took me some years, right? I spent about 15, 16 years in industries that weren't quite a fit until I came here, and now I found the place that I really want to be. So I want to tell you a little bit about Netskope and what it does and why it's so great to me. So, and Netskope provides cloud security. And if you think about what has been happening in the security space, security industry, it used to be, right, that when people went to work, or they went to school, or you know, anywhere, typically for the work environment, they would be going to an office location, and their data centers, where their data was stored, and their applications were all on premise. They were in the same place. I mean, it might be connected, but the data was all in one place, somewhere in the server closet across the hall. But over time, things have changed. Right now, we have all sorts of cloud applications, and we have data that's going in all different places. And you know from your iPhones, right? Your data is not all on your phone, it's up in the cloud. Similar things with companies. Their data started moving all over the place. And the other things that started to happen is that people started working from home a lot more, right? They started taking their computers home. They started bringing their own devices to work. They started working next to their Wi-Fi thermostats, which have not the best security. And so the security concerns have drastically changed for many companies. They have a lot of risks because of these changes and these transformations. And so one of the risks, there are many of them, but one of them is around data loss. So if you think about it, now the opportunities for data loss are a lot more varied and a lot more easier to kind of hit. So for example, we can have situations like employee theft, where an employee can come in, use their computer laptop to download their secret sauce recipe from their company's OneDrive, and then take that secret sauce recipe and upload it to their personal G drive. Right? They can do the same thing with patient data, with financial data, and so forth. And they can inadvertently post sensitive information through social media onto blogs and Twitter and whatever it might be, right? They can do that. And so there's all of these risks plus many more for companies. So what Netskope does, it offers solutions to secure all this. It allows solutions that maybe allow employees to go out to their G drive to download some vacation pictures to share with their coworkers, but at the same time, it does not allow uploads of sensitive data to that G drive. So that's what, real high level, the types of things that Netskope provides. But the other thing, and the space that's kind of near and dear to my heart, is that many companies don't even have this visibility of what's happening in their environments. They don't know that Susie is uploading documents, or that Johnny is posting online. They don't have that visibility. Netskope offers that as well. So if they use Netskope products, they also have the ability to get all of their data around what users are doing in their environments all in one location. And then what they can do is they can get visibility into that data. They can slice and dice the data to understand, where is my data moving, and do I have any gaps in my environment that need to be addressed? And so that's kind of speaking to this challenge that there's a lack of visibility into SaaS, so software as a service. And Netskope provides them the ability to do so. So these are just examples of some dashboards that are possible to create with Netskope products. And this is kind of the space that I live in. And so bringing that back to what is it that I do and why is it exciting to me personally? Question here I have is, what do I do as head of analytics strategy? And what I do as head of analytics strategy is I set the strategy how data brings value to our customers and to Netskope. And so what does that mean, and how do I do that? How do I determine how data will bring value to our customers in Netskope? It's so, in a way, I would say, when I started out down this road and thinking about this, it was very vague. I don't have a plan in mind. How would I achieve these things, and what do I do? And I would say the beauty of the role that I have right now in this position, in this place at this time, is that I actually get to decide what I need to do to achieve this, to decide this. And that's really cool, but also intimidating, because my boss does not tell me, here's your to-do list for the week, for the month, right? I decide what I'm going to be doing to affect change and to set the strategy. And so what is it that I do? One thing that I do is I work with customers. So account teams will involve me in customer accounts, and I talk to them and I try and understand what questions they're trying to answer with their data. And they may have a question like, Elena, I'm trying to understand what data leaks I have in my organization. Who's stealing data from us? And where is it moving? And so what I will do is I will work with those customers to understand their concerns. And then I may develop insights using our analytics product to do that. So I'll show them, hey, you have data moving to G Drive, or you have data moving to Dropbox, or people are using a risky application called Zippy Share to transfer data, and it's leaving your organization. So I'll do that. And then I might identify gaps in the product. I might look at what's happening and I might say, you know what, there's a feature missing in our product. There's a defect in our product. And what I will do is then I will work with product management and engineering, and I'll say, you know, these are the things that need to be addressed. These are the things that need to be fixed. And let's work together to do that. I also, in my role, enable sales. So I'll talk to our global sales team and I'll say, hey, this is how you may want to market, you know, how you may want to talk about this product, how you may want to show value with it. I may get out in front of our global sales team of hundreds of people, and I may talk to them about what they need to do to show value with their data. I may also work with marketing. I may develop a campaign. I might create a demo video for this product. So all this to say, develop training, and then also develop sales scale programs to accelerate impact. I might develop whole programs where we're creating a whole set of training for customers, for example. All this to say that all of these things, right? I saw these opportunities, I went for them, and I was able to span the organization and work with all different types of teams within the company. And in doing all of this, in having conversations with engineering and sales and customers and all of these folks, there's a lot of information I was able to stow away and then to process and come up with strategy. So that's kind of what that involves. And I say all of this because sometimes you hear about, I remember I used to hear about strategy roles, but I never really knew what it meant. So I think it's important to kind of understand what that may mean. So any thoughts on that or questions that folks may have? Does that make sense? Yeah.
What skills do you think you might need to do the kind of work that Elana is doing? I'll look at you after.
I'd say a good people skills, be able to work with people, a good network, especially in your position in the company. You should be able to understand how people work in the company, and you know, basically, since you're setting your own goals, in my opinion, understanding the company and understanding basically where the company is trying to get is very important, because there's no one to look after you in that way. So you have to put it down on paper alone. So I think that's a very good skill.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Communication is certainly key, and the ability to ask questions and talk to all these groups and understand their challenges, especially for the customer piece, right? It's being able to understand what is happening, you know, what's bringing the customer pain, so you can put them in your shoes.
Anybody else?
I would say management.
Yeah.
Managing your time well. It looks like you have a lot on your hands with working with customers and then dealing with the engineering. And then,
Speak louder, please.
oh yeah. I was saying managing her time with working with customers and developing the training, and a lot of stuff to do. I feel like that can all.
Absolutely. And I don't do all of these things too. It's also partnership, right? I can't do all these things alone. So it's a lot of partnering with different organizations too. If I'm developing training, for example, I may develop some training, but then I'll go to the academy, the Netskope Academy team, and I'll be like, can you polish up my video? Right? Because I don't know how to post process. It might be, you know, hiring some interns. If I started some work, I might hire some folks, I might hire some interns to do some of this work. Hint, hint for everybody. So it's all of that. Yeah. All right. So so the next thing I want to talk about is analytics. I spent a large, obviously the majority of my career in the analytics space. And there's a lot of topics we can cover in around analytics. I can't cover them all in like in this short amount of time. So I'll just talk about things that I particularly found interesting, or things that the topics that come up a lot. And one thing I'll say is that when you're thinking about the entire analytics field, right, there's I've had a lot of experience with the reporting and the straightforward analytics. There's also a whole section of data science that's involving data organization and how do we put it in databases and how do we organize it and tune it for performance and all of that, right? While I have sort of interfaced with that, I haven't worked in that space. And there's also on the other side of that, there's also artificial intelligence, machine learning, building models, utilizing models. I have utilized models, I haven't built them myself, right? So there's that space. So I'm going to talk to you about this middle of the road type of area where we're talking about, we got a bunch of data in the database, we need to take it out to answer some questions. And a topic that comes up a lot is, what is reporting and what is analytics, and is there a difference between the two? And if you kind of Google this topic, you'll see, yes, like people say, yeah, there's a difference between reporting and analytics, and I just want to kind of talk about that. So reporting, if you kind of, I kind of looked this up myself, is the organization presentation of data that is easy to consume and addresses the question of what is happening. So it's telling you, like, how many pieces of malware did we hit last week? That's like a reporting question, and let's see that trend. On the flip side, analytics involves asking novel questions, drilling into the data and exploring to answer why something is happening and what should be done about it. Right? That is the difference. But many people confuse this boundary, and that's because when you think about it, let's say I have a question about why something is happening. Why did my customer stop purchasing my product? And I drill into the data and I have a hypothesis, and I just so happen to find out, well, I raised the price on the product 3 months ago, and my customer sentiment went down, right? And so I realized that, it probably has something to do with the fact that I changed my pricing and my customers got mad about it. But then as soon as I take that information and I make it repeatable, I make it like I'll have a graph that'll show me customer sentiment and the price changes for a product, then it becomes a report, right? So it's no longer drilling and exploring, it's providing a report. And so that's why these things are often confused. In any case, let's also talk about some examples of reporting. These are some examples. These are actual questions that I have worked to answer in my career. First one, what is the attrition rate for customers? So Bank of America Finance Department was very concerned about customers leaving the bank. And so they would look at attrition rate and trend that over time and understand how that was working. That was one of the things I worked on. How cross-penetrated are customers? Cross-penetration is referring to how many products the customer has of our product set. If we have 30 products, how many of those does the customer have? Do they have 20? Do they have 1? Do they have 10? Whatever it is. And it's looking at that. What is the balance growth of our customers, right? Are their balances growing? Are they declining? And then 4, this is still reporting, but getting a little bit more complex and a little bit more interesting. And that is, how do customers behave given a certain treatment when compared to a control group? So this is looking at putting customers, segmenting customers into different groups, and then following those customers over time, and then also pulling control groups that do not have that treatment applied to them and seeing how they behave. Other questions are, what is the campaign? Was the campaign effective, and is the response statistically significant? When I worked at the Bank of America marketing department, that's a lot of what we looked at. We ran campaigns that was maybe an email campaign that targeted millions of customers. And you had a response rate of, let's say, 3% to that campaign. And the control group response was 2.5%. So the question is there a difference? Was it just random that one group had 3% response rate and the other 2.5, or is that statistically significant? And those are the type of questions we were trying to answer with that, because when you have these scale, those percentages matter. And some other questions. How much malware has our organization encountered in the last 30 days? So those are all reporting examples. And this would be analytics examples. The first question, how should the financial advisors be assigned brokers? So again, in Bank of America, financial advisors have lots of specialists. They can have product specialists, they can have banking specialists. One question that was asked was, how should they be assigned? And we don't have a broker for every single financial advisor. Who should get them, who should not? That involved looking at the profitability of financial advisors. Was there a banking need for customers that the financial advisor had, and so forth. Second question, why are two different wealth scoring systems getting different results? This is involving investigations. You know, we have two wealth scoring systems. Why are there two different results? Well, maybe it's a timing difference, maybe two different sets of customers, maybe different metrics are being looked at. What opportunities exist to increase balances and cross penetration of wealth households? So on the previous slide, we looked at how cross penetrated are the customers and what is the balance growth. But here we're trying to affect those things. How do we affect those? How do we increase this? This is not straightforward. There we have to take a look to see what opportunities there exist with the households. And there's some others. You know, why are customers not using my product? Why did the customer stop purchasing my product? Any like questions on these examples or thoughts? So if not, I kind of wanted to talk about seeing kind of examples of some of the things we've done here. What are the pros and cons of the analytics space that you should keep in mind? If this is an interesting space to you, what are things to keep in mind? On the pro side, being in the analytics space provides you lots of flexible career options. You can go into virtually any industry, and with an analytics background, you can, I don't know, sky's the limit, I would say, right? That having that experience of working with data can set you up for any number of positions, managing projects, going into the C-suite. So lots of career options. You know, my husband is a pharmacist, I will say, and that is a very limiting career choice, I would say, because once you get a degree in pharmacy, you're a pharmacist. And it's very hard to break out of that. Not so with data and analytics. You have a lot of different options to you. There's lots of interesting problems to solve, in my humble opinion. You saw some of the questions we were answering on the previous page, and you can choose to answer other ones. They could be things that motivate you on a personal level, right? For me, it's information security. For others, it might be crime statistics or health metrics or whatever it is. You can choose an area that's meaningful to you and solve problems there with data. And also there's a balance of art and science. So there's a healthy component of logic and practicality, but also you have to weigh that with some creativity. How do we present the data? And we'll see that in the next example. On the con side, I should have labeled these a little bit. On the con side over here, there are some significant challenges in the data area. The first one is your insights are only as good as your data, and your data is always imperfect. So you can think of the data you have available to you as like a large piece of Swiss cheese with very large holes. Typically, the data that you have access to, and you can think of this piece of Swiss cheese as partially moldy as well, because large chunks of your data are missing, and the chunks that are available often need to be cleaned off. You need to scrape that mold a little bit to get to the right data set. So there's lots of issues with data. And that goes back to actually to bullet point 4 over here, that oftentimes you spent 90% of your time data wrangling, finding the data and understanding what it means, getting it properly formatted, and 10% of your time doing the interesting analytics. That's something to keep in mind. And the other two things is it's easy to misinterpret your data, and we'll talk about that too. It's really hard to tell the truth with data. That's going to be the next kind of example we'll talk about. And also politics and ethics come in quite a bit here. So example in Bank of America land is when I was working on campaign measurement, and measuring the effectiveness of campaigns, we ran into problems that many business partners would refuse to sponsor any measurement of campaigns. And the reason they did that is because they didn't want to see that their campaigns weren't working, right? So there's kind of like, people don't want to see sometimes, they don't want to hear the answers they might get when you do analytics. And then also on the ethics side, you might be asked to do things that are sort of definitely morally in the gray area, right? Can you change this data a little bit? Can you get rid of the bad results? And you have to kind of choose, are you willing to go along with that or not? And it's also your job on the line. So what's morally okay and what's not? So you will come into that. Maybe that happens in every job, honestly, but data, I think, for sure. So any thoughts or questions on that part of? If not, let me talk to you about like sort of this issue and this topic in data that comes up a lot. And that is that there is a statement, I still hear it today many times from people outside of the data field, that data doesn't lie. Hard, cold numbers, right? But this is not true. Data does lie. Telling the truth with data is much harder than lying with data. It's much easier. And I'm gonna walk you through some of the challenge that I encounter on a daily basis when I work with data that sort of illustrates this. And so the first is like this visual I'll show you. And what I'll say is that for data to tell you the truth, you have to take a look at all the data together, right? That is the truth. This data set that you have in front of these millions, billions, thousands of data points. But the problem is when you see all this data, all of it, here it is you can't make any sense out of this data because it's too much. The human mind is not meant to analyze this number of data points. And so, you know, if we think about that, this being the truth, we as human beings can't handle the truth. The kernel has told us so. We can't handle the truth. And so if you look at practically speaking how this works out, this is a problem that I ran into or run into all the time, and this is one example of it. So in this analysis that I'm trying to do, this is a Sankey diagram. I don't know if folks are familiar with Sankey diagrams. Sankey diagrams are very visually appealing, and they're great ways to understand relationships between things, right? And they show you data flow and all of that. And this is in one Sankey diagram where I was trying to understand the relationship between the website or application that users were visiting, the instance of that application, but I'll just say for us, for this audience, the owner who owns that application or instance, and finally, what users were doing there, the activities. Let me see that. Oh, it's covering activities, supposed to be up there. So over here, I was trying to find out this relationship, and I plotted all the data points. And so what you can see here is that this data makes no sense. First of all, I can't even read this because there's too many applications here. The lines don't make any sense. I can't figure out any relationships between things because they all look even. And even this whole complicated graph doesn't even fit on the page, right? It should be like way up higher too, right? So this is what happens when you try and look at all the data to understand what's happening. And so faced with this situation, what you need to do is you need to aggregate your data. So this is something I did. I changed this diagram, right, that had the application and the app here, and I aggregated. Instead of using an app, I used the category field. And so what that does is it puts all the applications and the websites in categories. For example, if we're talking about G Drive or Dropbox, that would go into the cloud storage category. I don't know if it's visible, but this one right here is cloud storage. And it just basically categorizes things that way. And then we have the same fields were left over. So now things are starting to look much better. At least they're fitting on the screen. They're still a little bit tough to make out. And also, if I'm interested in understanding who owns, what the instances are of these applications, I'm getting a lot of fields over here in the center. I don't know if you can see this. It says null for that. And so that doesn't give me any information. And again, it's sort of not clear. So what I have to do is I have to filter this stuff out. I'm going to take out the nulls so I can see the data better. And so now I made that change. I took out the nulls. Maybe I took out a couple other things. I don't recall. But now I have this view, and this view you can see is much cleaner. Here I can see clearly all the data points. I can start to make some decisions about what I'm seeing. I'm seeing that a lot of my applications fall into the cloud storage category. Here I have this, I'm not going to talk about this to confuse you folks, but over here I have the activity, and I could see, hey, most of the time we're using cloud storage applications and we're either downloading things from there or we're logging into them. And then there's a few other activities like uploads. So doesn't matter for this audience what decisions we make out of this, but having a view like this, we can make decisions much easier. We can start to understand, maybe we make some decisions. Maybe I show this to my leadership and I say, hey, look, guys, we gotta stop those downloads. They're a problem, right? Maybe. And we can start to make the decisions. But the problem that we have to keep in mind is that we did all of this work and we created this view right here. But to get to this view, we aggregated the data, we removed nulls, we'll filter the data. And what we need to always remember is that what we're looking at and what we're making decisions based on is the tip of an iceberg. And everything else down here is underneath the surface. And so when you're talking about, when you're working in the analytics space, you have to make decisions like this all the time. What do you show to people and what don't you show to people? So the question ends up being, have we given an accurate representation of what and why something is happening? That's the question you're asking yourself when you do these types of analysis. Have we removed irrelevant data, in which case that makes sense? Or have we cherry picked our data? And that's kind of like one of the big challenges, I would say, that you're dealing with when you're dealing with analytics. Thoughts?
Questions, comments, thoughts? I have some questions for you. How do the charts of the diagrams that you saw here differ from some of the charts and diagrams that you're learning how to make in Excel? And how are they similar and different? I'll pick on Vinny because I know your name.
Well, for at least for CS100, we have this like SAM trainings or sorry, Excel projects, and we're given a lot of the times we're given like an existing graph that isn't scaled properly or is missing certain key features that will sort of make it like the images showed a few slides ago, where you can understand everything. Like there's too much information, scale is all wrong. So we haven't completely done any of those graphs, but we've done, we've taken graphs that look a certain way and through the steps of the process made them much more clean and easy to understand.
How many have you created charts or graphs or visualizations of data in CS100? What makes a good one? What sort of things make the data or the charts that you're making useful to somebody?
Understandable.
What makes it understandable?
You can read it and understand it. It's like appealing, I guess. Maybe.
Okay. Okay, so things to be labeled.
Yeah.
Good. What else?
The information that you need is on it. So like you can skip all the irrelevant things.
You can.
So like the information on the table or the graph is like the information you need, and you can skip all the information that it's extra.
So when you don't show things that don't make sense or aren't needed.
Yeah.
Data has to be accurate.
That's the Swiss cheese problem she talked about, right? Your data has to be accurate, and you have to trust that it is, otherwise your charts are only as good as your data is.
There's something else I didn't talk about, but it makes me think like kind of this conversation about what we're trying to accomplish here. I didn't talk about it, but I think what's really critical in all of this is when you create this visual or whatever visual you create, why are you creating it? Why are you creating this diagram? Right? I didn't really get into that, but I think that's the most critical piece of what you do when you create these visualizations. Here, I am trying to understand the relationship between applications, their owners, and activities, right? So I can make a decision to see if I have gaps in my environment that I need to address. And so similarly, when you create your visuals, I think that's one of the most important things that you should think about is when I'm creating this bar chart, why am I creating it? What's it supposed to tell the person who's looking at it? I think that sort of is almost fundamental to a lot of what I do and a lot of probably what all of you will be doing. When you're doing work, why are you doing it? Who are you doing it for and to what end?
What tool did you use to create this? Is this an internal tool or is this?
This is Netskope Advanced Analytics. But yeah,
So for those of you who are interested in learning more about this kind of stuff at Bentley, there are 2 courses that you would take next. And you can choose one of 2 of them. One is CS 150, which is an actual course. And the other course that is CS 160, which teaches you how to make charts kind of like that using Tableau. That course is called Data-Driven Decision Making, which gets at exactly what you were talking about earlier about how can you look at data and package it in such a way that it tells a story. How can you tell stories with data so that you can get the message across? And as you're talking, one of the assignments that they do in that class is they actually have students create graphs that are misleading from data to show that the graph is right, but it doesn't necessarily tell what it needs to tell because either they're zoomed in too much, they left too much stuff out, things like that.
yeah. And there's a famous, I would say, individual in this industry, Edward Tufte, who is famous for kind of talking through about the proper way to visualize things and how data can be misleading. I saw him years ago and I thought it was very interesting, very inspiring talk. So yes, so that's my bit on analytics. Any other questions or thoughts? And then I'll move on to my last section, which is helpful career advice or what has worked for me.
Sure.
All right. So let's talk about that. All right. So there's lots of things I can talk about in terms of what's important in your career to have success. But what I'll say is a career support system is absolutely critical. And the angle that I want to talk to you about is the angle of making sure you have a career support system, which it comprises of your network, your mentors, and your sponsors. Now, at the very beginning of the conversation, I also talked about personal support, right? That is also critical. But here I'm going to talk about from a career perspective. And so just to kind of talk about this, I organize this as in a pyramid format because you'll see in a second why that makes sense. But so network, these people are your peers, your professors, people you worked with, people you've met. This is your network of people. And these people are important because this is your source of information. So these are the people you're going to talk to and you're going to find out, hey, Bob works over here at this company. They like it. This is the kind of work that they're doing. Jenny's working over here. It's really critical because you'll get a sense for what's going on. What are the trends? What are people doing? Super important, right? And you absolutely should be very focused on growing this network. And we're going to talk about my suggestions for how you grow your network and how you maintain it. And the other reason that your network is really important is because this network is where you're going to potentially find your mentors. Now, mentors, there's a lot, if your network is comprised of like hundreds of people, right? Mentors is an order of magnitude less than that. You might only have 1, 2, 5, 10 mentors, 20, something like that. These people are your trusted advisors that you go to for advice. And this is going to be critical in the workforce because when you go start your job, you're inevitably going to get into a sticky situation. You're going to have a conflict with your manager or your peer or your coworker, and you're going to have to be able to resolve that somehow. How are you going to do that? If you don't know how to do that, you might rely on your mentors to talk through that issue you're running into and figure out what they suggest. And the other reason that these people can work, the other thing I want to say is you want to have a few of these people because you might go to different people for different types of advice. You might have one mentor who's really good at understanding the organization that you're in and how it's organized and how to get things done. You might have another mentor who's really good at communications and how do you word that email to get your message across. So it's really important. And these people come out of this network. And we'll talk about that on the next slide. And then finally, critically, the top of the pyramid here are your sponsors. These are people that believe in you, that trust you, and that have the influence to get you to the next level. Okay. These people are hard to come by, and you can't just pick them out somewhere. They have to pick you. And so to get these, to get ahead in your career, whatever your goals are, you need to have sponsors watching out for you. But how do you get them? Well, you get them because you're going to be working on your network to building it. Out of that, you're going to get mentors, and some of these mentors are going to become your sponsors. So what I wanted to do is give you some practical do's and don'ts about networking, because I imagine for you folks, this is the part where you need to focus on right now in the networking space. So how to network, how to build your network. First suggestion is reach out to people for informational interviews. So informational interviews is basically that you meet somebody or you see somebody on LinkedIn and you're like, hey, I'd like to learn more about what you do. Can we set up, can we meet for coffee for a half hour? Can we do a Zoom call? Can I call you? And can I just learn a little bit about what you're doing? And so in that, it's in an information exchange. That person learns about what you do and what you're interested in. You learn about what they do. And it's a great way to build your network. If you're going to be doing that, a great way to do that is to leverage your mutual connections for warm introductions. So if you know that Professor Mark here has a connection that you'd like to speak with, you might ask him to introduce you. And he may say, maybe, or maybe say no. Right? Maybe he'll say yes. So it's always up to that person whether they want to introduce you, or you can, if you can't do it that way, you should reach out to the person. But you're more likely to get a response if somebody you both know introduces you. The other third bullet item is don't ever ask for a job on an informational interview. And I would say even don't ever ask for a referral. I think people will not want to talk to you if they're going to expect that somebody's going to be asking for a job. And certainly same thing goes for referrals. I have heard recently that this is a thing. They'll reach out to somebody in a company and say, can you refer me for a position? I wouldn't feel comfortable doing that if I didn't know you. A fourth item is when you talk to people on informational interview, keep the chain going. So if you're talking to a person in an informational interview and you're finding out about what they do, and they say, well, I know another person and they're doing this job, and they offer to introduce you to that person, that's great. That's exactly what you want to do, because that builds your network and gets you to the next level. What else do I have here? Obviously, some of these things are pretty obvious. Follow up and connect with your connection occasionally. If you have a conversation, obviously follow up and say thank you for that conversation. And if that chain of like connecting to people leads to something positive in your life, you should definitely circle back with that person and thank them for that. So then the next thing goes to the mentoring. If you talk to somebody and you have a really, really great conversation, you really connect on a professional level to some of these folks, you should keep that relationship going. You should say, hey, maybe we meet on an occasional basis. I'd love to keep talking to you, because then these people that you meet become your mentors. And then they're the people that when you're in a crisis or when you're in an uncomfortable situation in your career, you can go to these people and ask them some questions. I think the other two things I have is connect with people that are completely different from you. Again, I'll say basically from my experience that you might have recalled, Bank of America. The people I was surrounded with were in the banking analytics professions, but none of them were in information security. But when I had a chance to connect to those people, I found a calling. And that's why it's important to connect from people that are completely different from you. And then another last thing is a pet peeve. Please don't connect to people that you've never met on LinkedIn in terms of like asking for a connection and nothing else. Like people do that all the time to me, and I'm like, why? I would never connect to somebody I don't know. Although if somebody, very rarely, if somebody ever reached out to me and said, I just want to have a conversation about what you do for work, I would love to do that. Happy to have that conversation, but not for random connections. So that's what I would say about networking. And the other thing I put out here for, people who might be interested, like, I know that for me, this was kind of hard. Like, how do you word these things? How do you word these requests to connect? And, here's an example, right? Hi, name. It was great to meet you last night at the event, wherever we met this person. I'm relatively new to InfoSec. I'm trying to meet more folks in the space. Would you mind if I set up some time to connect with you in the coming weeks? Like
You
simple
should be
message.
taking pictures of this slide,
Do we provide slides?
if you want me to like that.
Yeah, I can provide this stuff.
We'll put this up on the same website, but.
Yeah.
Letter.
Yeah, so this is kind of like, and I have another one where this is a little bit more meaty. Like this one's very kind of casual and light, but this one's a little bit more meaty. And this is like straight out of my inbox. This came from a warm introduction. Somebody introduced me to a person, and so I'm writing to them and I'm telling them, thank you for agreeing to chat with me regarding information security space. And then I'm writing, as I'm exploring the InfoSec space, I'm looking to, what do I want from you? I'm looking to gain a broad overview of the space, to understand how I can move into this space. And I'm trying to do this mid-career. So how do I do that? Please let me know what times work best, blah, blah, blah. And then I also included some information about my background. So what this does, a lot of people want to know, why do you want to talk to me? You want a job? Is that why you want to talk to me? Yes, you're probably talking to them because you want a job, but you're not going to say that. You're gonna say, I want to learn about this space, and it's good to be specific about where you're coming from. They may ask you to give your background information. I wrote a lot here, honestly, and I don't even expect you to read it, but the crux of the thing is that first you're telling them, who am I today? I am marketing information leader, blah, blah. And then you're telling them, what is your background? You can even make this shorter, honestly. Where do I come from? What have I done in the past? And then what's my goal, or what do I want? I have a strong interest to transition into information security space. And that's what I'm telling them in my background. So that's what I would recommend, that you use those references. Practice makes perfect. Doing this process and networking with over 100 people is how I learned how to do public speaking, because in talking one-on-one, I got my message honed down, and then I was able to repeat that message to smaller groups, and then bigger ones, and then bigger ones, and then bigger ones. So that's also, if you're interested or nervous about public speaking, that's also a way to work up to it without giving yourself anxiety. So I don't know how we're doing our time. Are we way over? Oh, no, good. So good. So by the way, just to wrap up, and I'll pause for questions, of course. If you're interested in Netskope and what we do and working for us, yes, we are hiring. This is some information about us. You can visit the career page. You are also welcome to reach out to me, connect with me on LinkedIn, but tell me why first. And I'm happy to have a conversation with anybody here one-on-one if you're interested. So, but before we end, like, what does anybody have any questions or thoughts? No, Shaker. Okay. Oh, go ahead.
What kind of jobs can you apply, or like what industries can you get in with the data analytics?
Yeah, you mean later on, or as an intern, or?
Like later on in life?
Well, I mean, so I mentioned a few, right? What did I do? I went into the finance department first. And in the finance department, I worked on all sorts of questions that the finance teams needed assistance with. What are the balances looking at? What is attrition looking at? We're trying to move these customers from this location over here to this location over here. How do we do that? Who are the customers? The other thing you can do is you go to marketing, right? You can go to any number of industries, but I went to marketing. And there you're asking questions about how do we increase revenue? All right, where do we find opportunities? That's the analytics in the marketing space, but you can also leverage your analytics space to support campaign operations. We've got to run a campaign to these million customers, they need to get an email. How do we find them in the database? How do we apply suppressions to those people? And how do we do that? Or information security, right?
How much of what you learned when you were in college do you find applicable in your job now?
God, I don't know.
And, or, because based on what you've been talking about, a lot of the stuff that we teach now and that these guys learn now will be out of date later, and, or they'll be in jobs that didn't exist while they were here, just like data analytics wasn't a field when I was in college. So how do you adapt what you know? Maybe that's the question. How do you adapt what you know to the evolving technology landscape of careers?
So I think that having a college, a degree or whatever you're learning now is going to help you in your next job, in your first job, maybe in the second job. But beyond that, you may have heard, like certainly I have heard this, that your college experience becomes less and less relevant as you move through time, because what you're learning, the skills you're learning right now is really discipline for how you're going to continue to learn in the future. You're not going to, when I was in college, I was programming in C++ and C, right? I don't know who programs in that right now. When I started out in analytics, I was programming in SAS. That's what we used. SAS is certainly being phased out in favor of Python. I don't know Python. I've never programmed a day in Python ever. However, if you give me some Python code, I can probably figure it out, right? Because it's just it's a programming language like any other, and you can figure it out. So what you're learning today is the discipline to continue learning in the future, is what I would say.
Any other questions? Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Elana. Also, we want to thank Netskope for providing the snacks and the pizza today. So please make sure you grab a slice on your way out if you're gonna stick around before you go. Please also take the survey if you haven't done so. I'll put the QR code on the screen so we can have that information from you.
And I'll be sticking around for a few minutes. So if anybody wants to have a chat or have a direct question for me, I'm happy to chat. All right, thank you, guys.